Good evening, everybody. Today, we are going to discuss a very, very interesting topic. It's the fastest way to learn DevOps. What do I mean by that? We know that DevOps has very, very different and complex definitions. And there are a wide variety of tools that fit into this definition. Whenever people talk about DevOps, we are talking about almost 20, 25, 30. Some people can list even 40 DevOps tools, right? So obviously, it is not possible to learn all of them. And that's where it is very, very important to identify the right DevOps tools and focus on learning those tools. And that's what we'll be doing in this specific video. We'll be discussing what is the fastest way to learn DevOps. We also have a DevOps expert with us, Ravi. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks, Ranga. Thanks for inviting me for this discussion. I'm really excited to be part of this.
The first thing we'll try and do is try and find out what are the important factors that are related to DevOps. If you look up any definition of DevOps, they are very, very complex. How do you simplify the definition of DevOps and identify what are the important factors that are related to DevOps? That's where I think three factors are really, really important. One is communication between members in the teams. There are different teams that are part of DevOps. You have development team, testing team, you have operations team, and you have also the functional or the business team. So enabling good communication between all the team members and the teams that are part of the entire project is one of the most important goals of DevOps. If you look at Agile did really, really well in bringing good communication between business, development, and testing team. All these three teams are part of this sprint, and there is constant communication between them. The team which is left out was operations, and that's what DevOps tries to bring in as well. So DevOps tries to break the silos or the wall between the entire development team and the operations team. So enabling communication between all the members of the team is one of the most important goals of DevOps. The next important factor is common to anything related to software. Whatever you do in building a software, you'd want quick feedback. When you do something, you'd want to know whether it's working or not immediately. There are a number of steps that are involved in software development lifecycle: coding, testing, deployment, testing, and then we go on to moving it to production. And there are different things that we do, and you'd want quick feedback in each one of them. As soon as I code something, I would want to find out if the code is really working. Is it passing the unit tests? As soon as I build something, I would want to find out if I'll be able to deploy it to an environment properly. And business is also interested in getting quick feedback. If we are developing a feature, business also wants to know what's happening with that feature. Are users liking that feature or not? If there are huge release cycles, if we have long release cycles, then getting quick feedback becomes really difficult. So that's second goal of DevOps, to enable quick feedback across the entire life cycle. The third one is also a constant in most software development goals, right? You'd want to automate as many things as possible. As we discussed earlier, there are a lot of steps from the time you build software to the time you deploy it and you manage it in production. And as much as possible, you would want to automate as many steps as possible. So that's, for me, some of the important goals of DevOps. When we go from the goals to the tools, you'd see that a number of tools fit into this category. Now, the most important question as somebody who is going to learn DevOps is which of these tools to focus on? Which of the areas of DevOps do you want to focus on? If you are starting with DevOps, it is impossible to be a master on everything that is related to DevOps. And that's where we picked up a few important things that you can focus on as a DevOps beginner. The first thing that you need to focus on as a DevOps beginner is continuous integration and continuous deployment. Whenever I write some piece of code, I'd want to be able to run the tests. I'd want to build the deployable unit, and I would want to be able to deploy it, maybe to test environment, maybe to production environment. I would want to automate the entire life cycle. That is what is called continuous integration and continuous deployment. And one of the most popular options, or one of the most popular DevOps tools to do continuous integration and continuous development today is Azure DevOps. I think Azure DevOps is the number one tool out there for continuous integration and continuous deployment. There are a lot of other features that Azure DevOps also provides, but for me, CI/CD is the most important feature. If you look at alternatives for Azure DevOps, if you go to Google Cloud, then there is Cloud Build. And if you go to AWS, there is AWS Cloud Pipeline. Also, if you go back a little, we also have Jenkins. Jenkins, and before that, Hudson, are some of the popular tools to implement continuous integration in the last few years. From continuous integration and continuous deployment, what we would move to is containers and container orchestration. The next two tools I'm talking about are Docker and Kubernetes. Now, you might be wondering, how is containers or container orchestration related to DevOps at all? Why is containers important for DevOps? Right. So one of the most important thing is, if I go back 5 years back, you would see that the way I would deploy Java application is completely different from how I would deploy a Python application or a Node application. So the operations team needs to understand different processes for deploying a Java application versus a JavaScript application versus a Python application. And that's where Docker comes in, or containers come in. With containers, what I would need to do is to create a container image. The development team is responsible for creating a container image. And once you have a container image, the container image can be deployed the same way, irrespective of whether you are using Java, Python, or any other language. And that's one of the most important things that Docker and containers enable. They enable standardization. So once you have a container image, you can test it on your local machine. You can also test it on any environment. If you don't, you can even deploy it onto the cloud. So you package all that you need for building and deploying the software into the image, and the image contains everything that you would need. And the image, it's very, very important to understand how to create Docker images and how to use a Docker image and run it. And the third tool I would recommend is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is the container orchestration solution. The first question you might be wondering is, why do we need container orchestration? Are containers alone not sufficient? What happened in the last few years is the migration or gradual switch towards microservices architecture. Instead of having one application, we now have 5, 10 applications or 10 microservices which combinedly provide the functionality. And that's where you would have a number of containers. So each of the microservices will have its own containers, and you might have n number of these containers as well. So you need to manage all that. How do you ensure that I'll be able to deploy different containers related to different microservices, and also ensure that these microservices are all highly available? If one of the containers is down, you'd want to be able to identify it, and then you'd want to replace it with a live instance. In addition, you'd also want to do things like auto scaling. Based on the load, you'd want to increase the number of container instances. You'd want to decrease the number of container instances. Also, there are a number of common features that these microservices need. Probably logging, probably tracing. All these common things also need to be implemented. And that's where there is a need for something to orchestrate the containers. And that's where Kubernetes comes in. Kubernetes does a great job in orchestrating containers. I'll take a pause at this point. Ravi, do you want to add anything related to continuous integration, continuous deployment, or containers?
Yeah, as you said, so Azure DevOps is one of the important tools, or becoming a very popular tool nowadays. We see more and more customers are migrating towards Azure DevOps from Jenkins because of all the SaaS model, right, where all the new features are coming up very easily. So you don't have to update it. Whereas Jenkins, you need to install and you have to maintain locally. So we see customers are moving towards Azure DevOps. Also, Azure DevOps is not only used for CI/CD. Azure DevOps is a host of other functionality, like for example, the boards and testing plans and other things. Especially the boards, which is used for for your agile or Scrum process, that helps in running the process. Right, the DevOps. When we talk about DevOps, we talk about people, process, tools. So the other way you talked about communication, automation. So similarly, so the process part also Azure DevOps is coming into the picture. That's also something interesting to check apart from the CI/CD. And Docker and Kubernetes, yes, like they revolutionized how the Java applications or general application, business applications are built and run, packaged and run. And so that way, that they are also very critical. So if you look in real life, what we see, Docker, people are not direct using Docker anymore because there are a lot of encapsulation comes around it. So, for example, if you use Kubernetes, for example, you will be creating Docker images and then you will be giving the Docker image details to the Kubernetes. But if you are using, for example, the Cloud Foundry and other things, there are other tools which hides the complexity of creating the Docker containers and things like that. But it is important to know the concept of Docker, what it does, what are the benefits of Docker, and things like that, to know more about Kubernetes and other type of tools. So that is something that you need to be aware of. When you talk about Kubernetes, Kubernetes is the de facto standard now for container orchestration. But there are few other tools like Pivotal, Cloud Foundry, etc. There are a lot of other container orchestration solutions. But as you said, the Kubernetes is the kind of a leader in this space. So that is a good tool to have some little bit of knowledge on it.
Cool. So Kubernetes also has a number of cloud services that are present as well, right? So we are talking about Google Kubernetes Engine. We also have a service in Azure and AWS as well for Kubernetes. So
That's
it's
correct.
also available in all the clouds.
That's correct. So that is the benefit of running on Kubernetes, because apart from you can install Kubernetes on your on-prem environment and you can manage it, but all the three major cloud providers also providing as a managed service. So you can just spin up a Kubernetes cluster and you can start deploying your application load onto them. So which makes it very easy for adoption by the enterprises. So that
Yeah,
is
and
that is also very important.
absolutely. And to add on to that, like there are things like Anthos that are helping you to run like Kubernetes clusters on multiple clouds and even on premises. So you can have your infrastructure present on multiple clouds or on premises, and you can have single way to manage all that.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
Cool. So yeah, I think like as far as DevOps is concerned, understanding continuous integration, continuous deployment, understanding containers and container orchestration are really, really good starting points. And after that, I think we should shift to infrastructure as code. Whenever we talk about the cloud, you'd want to create multiple environments, dev environments, stage environment. It's not just the cloud. Anywhere we do software development, you'd want to have multiple environments, dev, QA, stage, and production. And you don't want to repeat the same manual steps in all the different environments. If let's say I would want to deploy a simple application, there might be 5 or 10 components that I would need to create. If I create all these things manually, then there is every chance that I make a mistake when I'm setting up a stage environment or a production environment. And that's what infrastructure as code tries to eliminate. It tries to automate the creation of your environments. If you want to create a virtual machine, if you want to deploy software to it, if you want to create a database, you can automate all that through script or code. And that's what infrastructure as code enables. One of the most popular tools to do infrastructure as code is Terraform. Terraform is multi-cloud in the sense that you can use Terraform to create infrastructure on AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud as well. And Terraform is used to do something called infrastructure provisioning. Whenever we talk about creating virtual machines or doing something, there are two very, very important steps which are involved. One is infrastructure provisioning. The other one is configuration management. You'd want to provision VMs. Let's say I would want to create 100 VMs and I would want to install some software on it. So the first step is to create 100 VMs. And the second step is maybe to install a web server on all the 100 VMs. The first step is called resource provisioning. And the second step is called configuration management. Terraform is really, really good at infrastructure provisioning. Ansible is really, really good at configuration management. In addition to these, there are a couple of other infrastructure as code tools which are really becoming popular. One is Pulumi and the other one is AWS CDK. AWS CDK is a AWS specific thing to create AWS resources, and Pulumi is again a multi-cloud approach to create resources in the cloud. Terraform uses kinds of scripts that enable you to create resources. Pulumi and AWS CDK use more of a programming kind of an approach. So you can use maybe one of your favorite programming languages to write programs using Pulumi and AWS CDK and provision infrastructure. So if you are trying to learn DevOps now, and if you want to learn infrastructure as code, I think you might want to choose Terraform for now. But I think in future, Pulumi and AWS CDK would also be really, really good options to consider. There are also a couple of other things which are part of infrastructure as code. Like each cloud has their specific templating language. For example, AWS has cloud formation, or Azure has ARM templates. These can also be used to do infrastructure as code, but these are not recommended. If you look at any cloud formation, or if you look at ARM templates, these are not easy to maintain, and not a lot of enterprises use cloud formation or ARM templates directly. Most of the enterprises use either Terraform or Ansible or Pulumi or AWS SDK, and very, very few enterprises use cloud formation or ARM templates. So to start off, I think Terraform is a great way to start. In addition to the first four, I think cloud is also very, very important when you are starting with DevOps. I think cloud makes DevOps really, really easy. Tools like Azure DevOps, tools like the Kubernetes implementations which are present on the cloud, and tools like Terraform. These are very, very easy to use with the cloud. And that's the reason why I included cloud in here. Like if you look at last few years, a number of enterprises are migrating to the cloud. And I think if you're learning DevOps, I think the best place to learn DevOps now is the cloud. Ravi, do you want to pitch in?
Yeah. So as pointed out, right? Actually, like if you look at the evolution of DevOps, both cloud and DevOps, I think they are evolved at the same time. Uh, the reason is cloud made things pretty simple to spin up our infrastructure and other things, which earlier completely owned by infrastructure admins. So they have the scripts, they were maintaining it, and it took a lot of time for organizations to deploy anything on the infrastructure, because the procurement time, setting it up time, everything. Once cloud came into picture, provisioning infrastructure became so easy. And also cloud vendors, they promoted automation, right? So because of that, everything is automated. You can provision environments and destroy environments within minutes. And still trying to do it manually is it's not a optimal way. So that is why the other tools like Terraform and these kind of tools became very popular, so that you create the environments, deploy the applications, run the applications, and when you don't need the environment, you can shut it down. So that way you save the cost and save the effort required to provision an environment. So DevOps and cloud in that sense evolved at the same space. And apart from that, yes, like when you look at it, cloud is not a per se DevOps tool, but as I said, now when people are talking about DevOps, invariably they are thinking internally thinking, okay, the cloud is also one of the key components in this area. So having experience in one or two clouds is really important if you really want to become a DevOps engineer or DevOps architect, and if you want to explore in a DevOps area.
Awesome. Thanks, Ravi. Let's move on to, let's quickly look at a few other skills that would be important as part of DevOps. We talked about continuous integration, continuous deployment, infrastructure as code. We talked about containers and container orchestration. We talked about the last thing which we talked about was cloud. So in addition to that, I think these are more skills you would want to focus on once you master the basic DevOps skills. I think whenever you talk about DevOps, having a little bit of programming background or a scripting background is very, very important. So learning something like shell scripts or Python might be a great addition to your skills when we talk about DevOps. The other important aspect of DevOps, as we talked about earlier, is automating as much as possible. And automation testing is a very, very important part of it. So whether we are talking about unit tests, system tests, load tests, there are a lot of things that you can automate, and automating that is also very, very important part of DevOps. And the other important area you would also want to focus on is operations, right? Whenever we talk about operations, whenever something is deployed to production, there would be problems. You'd want to be able to solve problems quickly. You'd want to be able to identify problems quickly. That's where you need to learn tools related to logging, tracing, and performance management as well. In addition to this, there are also a lot of tools that are used in different enterprises to enable communication. Ravi was mentioning one of the things related to Azure DevOps earlier. Ravi was talking about boards. bots enable team to communicate with each other about the status of user stories. So there are a wide variety of other tools which are used for communication as well. So these are a few other skills you'd want to focus on once you have the basic DevOps skills. Ravi, do you want to add on to this?
Yeah. So like when you look at it, right? So these DevOps skills, right? So these are making you a complete engineer, right? So so your mindset or idea is to have to become a T-shaped professional. Maybe you heard about this term, or you may not heard about this term. What is T-shaped professional? Like you have a very good skills on certain area. For example, you could be a developer, or you could be a tester, or you could be operations engineer. That is your primary skills. But then there you have a wide knowledge. You know a lot of things about that particular area, but also you will have about other areas. You will have a little bit of knowledge. Like you may not be an expert in that, but you know how to do things, right? So the reason is, as the one of the definition, there are multiple definitions that Ranga pointed out. One of the definition is, like making the walls break between development and operations. So how do you do that? Like you make a development team and operations team to work together. So you are responsible for building a solution, deploying the solution in production, and also running that solution in production. So you are completely responsible, end-to-end responsible. As I said, you can do it in multiple ways. Like you bring the team together, or what you can do is, like you are a developer, but also you know how to do operations, right? You know how to manage things in production. You also know what are the things to look up, etc. So the team becomes, like more knowledge, and they are self-contained team. There is still a separate operations team, but they are responsible for managing the infrastructure. For example, you are running on the cloud, so the operations team is responsible for managing the complete cloud operations, and you are responsible for day-to-day activities in your team. You starting up a new VM, or looking at the logs and looking at the monitoring. So those aspects is something that you are responsible for. It is within the skills of the team. Under the operations team, you will go to them only if there are bigger things, right? And it is something is down, and you are not able to solve it, then you need some help. So that is where you go to the other team for help. So that is how we see organizations are evolving, right? So becoming a T-shaped professional is very important. So that is where maybe we are listing down a lot of tools, but the thing is that you need not be expert in all the tools. It is about knowing the tools, what they do and how to use it, etc. But as time progresses, like you will be an expert in certain area. You will know about things in the other areas, and if it is interesting for you, you can gain more and more knowledge on that area. So that is how I look at it. This particular set of tools and additional tools that is required. So if you see automation and continuous integration and continuous deployment is something that you start with if you're a developer. So there is depending upon your primary skill set, right? As I talked about, like maybe if you are a developer, then you start with continuous integration and continuous deployment. But if you are a tester, for example, maybe you will start with automation testing and that area. But if you're already operations person, like you will know, or infrastructure person, probably you will start with the Terraform. How do I automate things, and how do I automate the monitoring, and how do I automate the deployment. So from so what is your current profile? What level you are in, and based on that, you will pick up some of the items. So
Awesome.
to gain the complete knowledge.
Awesome. So, and we would want to learn all these, irrespective of the cloud. I mean, irrespective of the role, I think cloud is very, very important, right? So, for all the roles, I think understanding the cloud would be really important as well.
That's correct. That's correct. Yes. So if you look at it, because of the digital transformation thing that is going on in enterprises, almost all the customers, 99.99% of the customers want things to run in cloud. And already we see more and more customers are running workloads on the cloud in some shape or form. Only the percentage changes, right? Some customers is already running 80% of their workload in cloud. Some of the customers are running, they just started 5% to 10%, but everybody wants to go to the cloud. So as a DevOps professional, it is very important to have knowledge on not only on one cloud but at least one or two clouds, because like all the customers, they don't want to go with a single cloud because of because of the vendor lock-in and things like that. So all the customers have one or two clouds. So it is better to start with one cloud and then extend your knowledge to some other cloud as well.
And the amazing thing is actually we already have a course which helps you to learn most of the important DevOps skills. This course is titled Learn DevOps, and you can see that this course helps you to learn a number of different DevOps related tools. This course helps you to learn Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and Azure DevOps. In this course, you will also play with Jenkins and Ansible as well. And the amazing thing about this course is that we would actually run infrastructure as code. We will run continuous integration, continuous deployment on 3 different clouds. So we would use Azure DevOps and deploy it to AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud as well. So it's like 6 tools on 3 different clouds. So in this course, you'll learn 6 different DevOps tools: Docker, Kubernetes, Azure DevOps, Jenkins, Terraform, and Ansible. And you'll learn the fundamentals of continuous integration, continuous deployment, and infrastructure as code, as well as you will learn 3 different clouds. I mean, you definitely not learn everything about the 3 clouds. We will be restricting our discussion as far as this course is concerned to just DevOps areas related to that specific cloud. So related to DevOps, we'll be playing with 3 different clouds. And if you look at the reviews which we are getting on this course, some of these reviews are really, really making me happy. So one review says the best instructor on Udemy, and the other review says excellent course. And this is, as I said earlier, 5 courses in one. And the other thing you can see in here is the focus on hands-on. Like the entire course is really, really hands-on. We'll get our hands dirty with most of the things related to DevOps. And let's quickly scroll down and look at the contents that we have in this specific course. What we would do is to get started with a functional overview of DevOps. We'll talk about Agile, and we'll talk about how we evolved from Agile to DevOps to get a high-level overview of DevOps. And after that, we would start playing with Docker. So we'll understand why Docker is important, how you can create Docker containers for different kinds of applications. Once we understand Docker, we'll be moving into Kubernetes. We will start with Kubernetes on Google Cloud, and we'll play with all the important concepts related to Kubernetes. Once we learn Kubernetes, we would get into infrastructure as code. And the most popular infrastructure as code tool, as we discussed earlier, is Terraform. So what we would do is we would play with Terraform, and we would create some infrastructure on AWS using Terraform. After that, we would get into continuous integration, deployment, and delivery. The focus, once we learn the basics of continuous integration, deployment, and delivery, and understand the definitions of them and what is the difference between each one of them, we would move into Azure DevOps. We would look at all the features that are present in Azure DevOps for continuous integration, continuous deployment, and delivery. After that, we'll also look at a few communication features that are related to Azure DevOps, boards, and backlogs. And we'll look at continuous integration with Jenkins. We will end this course by talking about configuration management using Ansible. As you can see in here, there are a wide variety of things that are covered as part of this course. I mean, obviously, it's an in 28 minutes course, and we would say good things about it ourselves. So that's something which you would expect anyway. But I think one of the most important things is you can look at the course. I'll put a link to it in the description and read the reviews on the course. I think this is one of the best courses. I mean, as somebody who's creating in 28 minutes courses, I would not say this about every course, but I think this is one of the toughest courses that we created. And it's, I think, one of the most technically challenging course that we tried as well. And Ravi was playing a critical role as well during the creation of this course as well. Ravi, do you want to add anything there?
No, as you said, this is one of the toughest courses we created. We made it ourselves tough because we wanted to create good value. I still remember what you said. It is about creating good value for the students. So that is why it covered 3 different clouds, various tools, and various other best practices and perspective. So it is more about it is more about training the students or who are interested in learning about DevOps with all the possible best content, so that they are ready to do the real time work. So in that way, I'm very proud to be associated with this course.
Absolutely. I think this is definitely one of our best courses. I think the complexity of each of these tools, I mean, I would say Kubernetes itself is a very, very challenging thing on its own. And to be able to cover these many tools on one cloud, I think we prepared for this course for almost, I think the content preparation took around 3 to 4 months for this specific
Yes,
course.
even more than
So
that.
yeah, I think this is like definitely, I mean, this is definitely one of the fastest ways I think you can learn DevOps. I think using this course as a springboard would be a great thing to do. Completing this course would take a while. I mean, it's not a quick fix solution. It would take at least, I would say, 2 to 3 months for you to complete this course end to end. But I think it's the best way to get started with DevOps. Once you do this course, you can focus on other things you would want to learn related to DevOps. Ravi, any final words you would want to add?
For inviting me in this session. I really appreciate it, and I'm really happy that I can share my experience and knowledge to your students.
Thanks a lot, Ravi. Thanks for being here. And until I see you in another video, here's bye from Ranga at in 28 minutes.